All right, so the next topic should be about nested loops. However, I do want to keep the length of the lecture for this week to be shorter than usual, so you can pay more attention to your weekly Java tutorials for the OOP, since you are just first introduced to it. So what I will do is I'm going to move this topic about nested loop to the later lecture about 2D array, two-dimensional array. It would be much more relevant to talk about nested loop over there. So what you can do is please just re-download the lecture slides. I already updated them when you see the lecture. This part here will be removed from the loops lecture. It will be added to the 2D array lecture for later. Okay, but when I'm recording, it's still there. So what I will do is I will simply just skip this part over here, and then it will be covered later properly. So you don't have to be too much concerned. So what I will do is I'm going to go to the last topic, which is about common errors. So the new slides you will download is going to transition to this common error section. Okay, so I would like to mention about several common errors, but up to now you should have already programmed quite many examples for the loops and array already. So these errors may not be any issue for you anymore. But let me just talk about it just for completeness, since they are in the slides. Okay, I will just go over on the iPad the common error one by one quickly. So I would suggest for every one of them, I'll present to you the code, and then you can pause the video, think about what the error should be, and then go over the solution together with me. Okay, that will be my recommendation. Okay, the first one, the intention is we define some user wants to continue. Let's say we want to build some console application. While the user still wants to continue, basically what we will do is we'll simply say, read some answer from the user, and the answer can be if the answer is simply just Y, standing for yes, and then that means the user wants to continue. Anything other than capital Y, so that means the user wants to quit. All right. So the question is this particular console application? Of course, this part here it will be some action which I just omit over here. Is this console program going to work as expected? Meaning that it's going to repeat the action over here for as many times as the user likes. So it will repeat for maybe at least once, and then as soon as the user wants to quit, it will quit. Okay, pause the video and think about it. All right, hopefully you thought about it. The answer is no. This piece of program over here will compile, however, it contains a logical error. The reason is, you can see the Boolean variable over here is uninitialized. And then, by default, for the Boolean variable, it will simply just get a false value. So that's the default value for Boolean variable. That's the default value. And then, what's going to happen if you simply want to see while? You want to check it, whether you should go for the first iteration or not. So this will simply just be false, meaning that you're simply just going to bypass the entire body of the loop, even for the first time. So that means nothing will be executed. Okay, so that's really the logical error, because the initial value by default for Boolean variable is simply false. So now, how do we fix it? So the fix will be, you may just want to make sure you initialize this Boolean variable properly. So you can say declare Boolean, and then the user wants to continue. So rather than simply leave it as default, you will simply say it should be assigned to true, because initially the user definitely want to continue just for the very first iteration. At the end of the first iteration, the user can specify whether they want to quit or not. Okay, so that will be the first error to look at. Okay, let's move on to the second one. The second one here, let's take a look. So this is the header of the loop, and then we simply want to print out every element in the array. Okay, well, the title here might just give you hints already, but pause the video and tell me what your thoughts are. All right, assuming that you thought about it, the problem is the equal sign over here. It's very easy to see. If the A simply looks like this, right? And then we know the very first index should be 0. The last index should be a.length minus 1. Okay? According to the state condition over here, so now, according to the state condition, we know that when I is simply equal to a.length, it would be allowed. Okay, it will be allowed, and then you can still go to the iteration, because it still satisfies the state condition. However, when I is simply equal to a.length, so that means this part over here will just be a.length. eta length is basically this particular index over here, which is definitely invalid, right? So that's why this will give you array index out of bound exception, which we spoke about already earlier this week. All right, how do you fix it? Very easy. To fix it, you simply just want to get rid of this equal sign over here. Just say strictly less than eta length. Of course, as we spoke about, in some cases you may want to say I less than eta length minus 1. Remember the sorting property check that we did earlier this week, right? All right, the next one. How about this one over here? So let's take a look. So loop counter I initialized to be 0, and then while I is less than eta length, and then we'll simply do I++ before we try to use AI, right? Again, we just want to print out every element in the array. So now, is this going? This is going to compile, but does it contain any logical error? Pause the video and think about it. All right, assuming that you thought about it, and the problem really is you are going to have an array index out of bound exception at some point. But let's see exactly how. Okay. So what I will do is I'm going to trace very quickly about the loop over here. So let's say we got A here. Okay, A length is simply just 4. Meaning that for I value is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3. Right? So 4 is not allowed. So we know that pretty well. However, the problem is for the very first iteration, when we actually try to use the I over here, I has been incremented already. So that means AI over here is actually going to get A1, right? Because I will be incremented by 1 already. What about the second iteration? For the second iteration, let's say I is simply equal to 1, right? We'll start with 1, and then we will do I++ first. So that means we'll actually do A2. Okay, you can see my point. And then let's use another color here. Let's say for the third iteration, I will be 2. And then we're going to say 2 again, right? So that's going to be A3. So far, we are still fine because we are still within the valid in this range of indices. What about the next one? Let's say here for the fourth iteration, I will be 3. However, you can see we have to increment I first before you use the I over here. So that means you're going to use A4. So this is actually wrong, because 4 is actually invalid index, right? So that's a problem. How do we fix it? Well, apparently, I would say in general, you don't really have to put I++ at the end. However, in some, you have to know whenever you don't really put I++ at the end of the loop, you have to justify why. Especially in this case, you just cannot justify it because you will run into array index out of bound exception. That's what you will run into. Okay, so the fix will be. You may just want to move I++ over here. That's what you want to do. All right, so that's the this error here. Okay, hopefully you're fine. Next one. What about this one over here? This one here, very similar to the very first one we saw. We just want to keep prompting the user to do something, right? So here we say string answer is simply read some answer from the user. And if the answer is simply capital Y, so that means the user wants to continue. So that means initially, if the user say Y, I want to continue, it will go ahead and do the very first iteration. And then later on, if the user want to quit, they should be able to quit from the loop, right? That's the intention for this console application over here. You can definitely try it out on Eclipse, but let's pause the video and tell me what your thoughts might be. All right, assuming that you thought about it. The problem really is, you can see, let's say if the user simply say yes to begin with, which means the answer is actually going to store the string Y. And then user wants to continue in the beginning would just be true, because the answer capital Y is also just equal to capital Y. That's how we compare strings. So this will just be true. And when this is actually true, so that means we'll definitely go into the loop for the very first iteration, execute whatever I have omitted, and then it's going to read the answer again. Let's say at this point, the user actually enter, let's say no, let's say n. However, n over here, so that means answer is not going to store n. But when we go back to actually check the while loop, are we actually going to exit from the loop? The answer is no, because there is no updates to the user wants to continue over here. There's no update to this particular variable. Only the truthfulness of this variable control the entrance or exit of the loop. So only updating this answer over here is not going to change the fact that the user wants to continue has been established to be true at first. So the logical error is we'll never be able to exit from the loop once the first iteration has been executed. Okay, so the logical error over here is, okay, let me summarize that very quickly. Infinite loop if the first iteration is actually allowed. And the reason is because the user wants to continue, which is which is what matters for the exit for the loop, because user wants to continue never gets updated. Wants to continue is not updated. Okay, so now the question is, how do we fix it? Well, update it. How can we update? One possible case would be you can simply insert a line over here. Let's say after you have read the latest answer by the user, you can simply say user wants to continue, and this Boolean variable should be updated by whether the latest answer equals y. So you can say answer over here dot equals y over here, right? So that's how you can fix it, right? You can see not having this line over here will make sure user wants to continue always stay as true. In that case, you definitely get an infinite loop. All right, let's see the next one. This one here, very interesting, I think. Let's say this. Let's say, again, let me just give you one example here. Let's say A is simply an array over here. Let's say it simply got, let's say 0 all the way to 9. So A.length is actually equal to 10. Let's say this is the example we are considering, okay? Let's say we want to run two loops for the array. We want to basically do this. So initialize I to be A.length minus 1, the last index, and then we simply want to print backwards. We want to print maybe from 9, and then 8, and then 7, and then 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So we're going to print backwards. That's basically what we want to do. And then we write another while loop over here, and then we want to print forwards again. So think about what's happening here is, for the first loop over here, the intention really is we just want to print all the way backwards, this way. And then for the second loop over here, what we want to do is, you can see the I++ that really indicates what we want to do is we want to print forward this way. That's the intention. However, does this piece of code do it? Pause the video and think about it. All right, assuming that you thought about it, the answer is no. And I will make it very precise about how I argue about it. You can definitely try to trace the code and find out why. Okay. However, I can argue very quickly over here. All you got to do is to look at the state condition over here. You can see the state condition over here is I larger than or equal to 0. So now, what does it really mean when you exit from this loop? The exit would be not the case I larger than or equal to 0, equivalent to I strictly less than 0, right? So that's something that's negative. For example, minus 1. So now, when you actually have this particular condition minus 1, let's say strictly less than 0, and then you try to check this, any negative number will be smaller than A.length. In this case, A.length is simply 10. So this will be just true, very easily. However, when you try to execute the body of the loop for the very first iteration, AI over here is going to be something like an A minus 1. So this is going to cause a crash. So you're going to get an array index out of bound exception. So I don't even need to trace it. I just by looking at the state condition over here, I can argue about what the corresponding exit condition should be, and then that should be something that's negative, strictly less than 0. So I will know that for the very first iteration here, I'm going to get the array index out of bound exception. All right. I think there's a final one. Okay, this one here is very similar to the misplaced semicolon that we did previously for the if statement. Let's do that quickly. So we got an array over here. Okay, somehow the array is not really used, but anyway, I just declared that. And then we got a loop initialized to be 0, only up to 9, and then plus plus. And then I want to print hello. It seems like I want to print out hello for 10 times, right? From 0 all the way to 9 inclusively. Is this piece of code going to do it? Pause the video and think about it. Okay, assuming that you thought about it, so now the answer is no. Okay, it's not going to do it. What's going to be the output, first of all? I can tell you that the output is going to be just one single hello. Just one single hello. The reason is, you can see there is a semicolon over here. I'm not sure if you spotted that. If there's a semicolon over here, so that means this part for the for loop contains the loop entirely. This is the entire loop. And this part over here, system out the print line hello over here. So this has nothing to do with the loop because the loop already ended over here. So this part over here is not body of the loop. It's simply just independent. So that's why this will always print out just one hello, which is over here. Okay, it's simply just something you should be aware of. So just make sure you don't really put any semicolon directly after the header of the for loop. In that case, even though you may just overlook this particular semicolon and thought this should be the body of the loop, but that's not, because this already ended the loop statement. All right, so that's about all the common errors I want to mention to you. So up to now, we really have covered very thoroughly about the procedural programming basics in Java. You may have seen this quite a bit in your previous courses in either JavaScript or Python, but I decided to really cover them also thoroughly again, just because number one, the syntax is different, and number two, I believe for many of the discussion there, I try to really go to logical rationale behind the code. So hopefully that also gives you some benefits. But when we move on to object-oriented programming, it doesn't really mean that procedural programming should be abandoned. It's definitely not the case. What's going to happen is, when you go to object-oriented programming, you will definitely need to program methods. Within every individual methods, guess what? You have to program procedurally. So that's something you definitely haven't wasted any efforts by reviewing the procedural basics of Java. All right, anyway, so that's about the loops in the arrays lecture, and we'll definitely revisit this later, both in the OOP context and also when we talk about the two-dimensional array. It's going to be a generalization of the one-dimensional array. So that's something we'll also explore deeper later.